So towards the end of September this year, I opened up the drawer where I keep my older phones and I came across this guy right here, the Google Nexus 6P, and I remembered that it's been about 4 years since it was released. Now, 4 years wasn't all that long ago, right? But in the tech world, we know a lot can change in that amount of time, and my goodness, have things changed. The Nexus 6P was sadly the end of the Nexus line of phones, a line of phones that so many of us had come to know and love back when Google teamed up with different manufacturers to put phones together. This one, of course, made in tandem with Huawei. Things really have changed. The 6P was considered by many, including myself, the best Android phone at least of 2015, and remember, the Note 5 had just been released about a month prior. That's how good the 6P was. This phone checked nearly every box as it was pretty much the most well-rounded and most feature-packed the Nexus line had seen. So let's take a look at those specs, shall we? We're looking at a 5.7-inch 2560 by 1440 OLED display coated in Gorilla Glass 4. It sported 518 pixels per inch and a hilarious, by today's standards at least, 71.4% screen to body ratio. Chunky forehead and chunky chin indeed. But hey, at the time, they were necessary because, well, remember the dual front firing speakers? The 6P had an aluminum body. It weighed in at 176 grams, which was slightly heavier than the Note 5 and a good amount lighter than the iPhone 6s Plus. It's actually a decent amount thinner than a lot of today's flagships at 7.3 millimeters. It had a rear mounted fingerprint reader, which, as you guys should know, I really enjoyed. It had a single camera on the back, and on the inside, it came packed with the Snapdragon 810 Adreno 430 GPU, 3 GB of RAM, and 32 GB of storage in its base model. And yes, it had a headphone jack. No wireless charging, no IP rating. It also had a battery size that was pretty big for that year at 3,450 milliamps, which was the biggest battery out of the best phones of 2015. The OnePlus 2 was the closest, if I remember correctly, at 3,300 milliamps, and the Note 5 and Moto X Style or Moto X Pure following at 3,000 milliamps. And speaking of other phones, the 6P also had USB Type-C, which wasn't adopted by a lot of 2015's flagships. Phones like the HTC One M8, the Galaxy phones, the LG G4, the Moto X, they all still had micro USB, while the 6P and a couple of other phones like the Nexus 5X and the OnePlus 2 sported USB-C. It's pretty weird to think about. So, what is the 6P like in 2019, a little over 4 years after its release? Well, from a Nexus fan's standpoint, it's a huge rush of nostalgia and I flippin' love it. And from a practicality standpoint, it's actually pretty surprising. So I decided to stick my main SIM into the 6P and I used it for a weekend, complete with an old, scratched up, beat up screen protector and a dbrand skin that I had applied long ago. And shout out to them, by the way, they're this video's sponsor. This skin has kept the back of my 6P scratch free throughout all of these years. You can check them out and all of their skins for current devices down below. Alright, so first off, I was really impressed with how well the phone ran. Now, don't get me wrong, it was a little slow by today's standards. It was pretty darn slow by today's standards, but basic app use and switching between apps was nice and swift overall. But as I was typing, I was reminded of how bad the vibration motor was. It feels like a bad budget phone's vibration motor. Ugh. The dual front firing speakers still sound nice. I was really impressed with those. This was a huge win over most of the other phones that just had a single bottom firing speaker. So glad those days are over. I'm not glad that the days of the headphone jack are about over. The 6P had one, of course, and at that time, not having a headphone jack was like unthinkable. Now, the 6P actually shares about the same footprint with most large phones nowadays, but of course it only had a 5.7-inch 16:9 display. So staring at this screen coming from phones like the, Note 10 and OnePlus 7 Pro, it's pretty rough, not gonna lie. It's pretty funny too, but I got over that rather quickly. Now, the battery life didn't hold up all that well. Of course, it's an older phone and that's what happens with phones. I made it to a little over 4 hours of screen on time before I needed to plug it in, and it dies around 6 or 8% every time. I think the biggest thing that got me though was the cameras. Now, in 2015, I'm pretty sure we crowned the iPhone 6s's cameras as the best in a smartphone. So it wasn't until the Pixel where a Google phone started to make some noise, no pun intended. And the reason why the cameras got me is simple. For a 4-year-old phone, These take great pictures, and I was kind of blown away, not gonna lie. So I decided to conduct a little social media experiment. Some of you may remember, towards the end of September, I posted some pictures to my Twitter and my Instagram asking you guys to guess the phone that took those pictures. It's safe to say that no one got it right, and the guesses were pretty much all phones of this year. We had so many guesses for the OnePlus 7 Pro, the OnePlus 7T, the Pixel 3, iPhone 11 Pro, and then we had some guesses for the Huawei Mate 30, Galaxy S10, the Note 10, and many others. But nope, it is the Nexus 6P that took these pictures. Being completely honest, that HDR Plus is mad impressive and more than capable of capturing great shots. Shutter speed and processing did take their sweet time, that's for sure. They can be pretty slow, but overall the cameras really impressed me. All in all, I found that the 6P is actually very usable in 2019, to me at least. Sadly, it hasn't gotten any big Android updates, with the last official update being Android 8.1 Oreo. But other than that, I got through that weekend pretty smoothly. Dealing with the battery life was rough, the speed wasn't what it used to be, the screen isn't close to what we have nowadays. It's not nearly as rugged as most phones are now, but like I said, it's usable. Now, I'm most certainly not going to recommend that you guys go out there and try to hunt this phone down online and buy one to be your main phone. You can find them for under $100 if you want to pick one up for a collection, for sentimental reasons, or just to own a big piece of Android history. The Nexus 6P marked the end of an era of smartphones that so many of us had grown to love. The Nexus had a good run. I'm super glad that the Pixels exist, but I do miss the Nexus brand. The name itself, what the Nexus phones meant and stood for, it was a good time, albeit somewhat strange and periodically rough. Anyway, what do you guys think of the Nexus 6P and just the whole era of Nexus? Let's talk about it in the comments. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you are new. I will talk to you guys in the very next video, and thank you so much for watching.